Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Danielle Fisher, and I'm the event manager here at Eco Canada. And today's session is called Exploring a New Frontier, Impact Assessment Management for EPs. Before we start, I would like to take a moment to recognize the traditional Indigenous lands where Eco Canada's office is based in Calgary. At Eco Canada, we're committed to working towards respectful acknowledgement, collaboration, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples across Canada. This starts with acknowledging our honor and privilege to live and work within the Treaty 7 territory. Today, we are presenting from the city of Calgary, home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We would also like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Niitsitapi, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina and Goodstoney, which include the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. Before we start, there are a few housekeeping guidelines for today's session to ensure that everyone can enjoy and participate effectively. All participants are muted, so please check your audio settings to ensure that you can hear us properly. If you're experiencing any technical issues, please use the question box and select Eco Canada, the organizer, and I will do all that I can to resolve the issue. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on demand to you within the next 24 hours. Everyone who registered for the webinar will receive an email and a link with the video. Any questions that you have about the presentation or today's topic can be submitted through the chat box or question box. We will have dedicated time after the presentation to answer any questions from the audience. And finally, we really want to know what you think about our webinars and how we can keep improving. You'll be sent a short survey after the webinar ends. Please let us know what you think or if you have any comments or suggestions about the webinar. Eco Canada's vision is to build the world's leading environmental workforce. Eco Canada seeks to help environmental workers succeed at each step of their journey. To do this, Eco Canada has developed programs tailored to individuals at different stages of their career. For those looking to enter the environmental workforce, Eco Canada provides training through the BEAR program and accreditation for environmental programs at post-secondary institutions. Eco Canada also provides opportunities for new workers to break into the environmental sector through wage funding for co-op students and recent post-secondary graduates. For those already employed as environmental workers, Eco Canada provides the environmental professionals and environmental professional in training certifications and EPT students. Lastly, Eco Canada provides opportunities for those with vast experience as environmental workers to provide guidance and direction to Eco Canada's products and programs through advisory committees and emeritus membership. I'd like now to hand it over to our speakers for their introductions. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Danielle. My name is Liz Getty, and I'm the Director of Certification with Eco Canada. So I've been with Eco Canada for over 15 years, where my focus has always been within the certification team and ensuring that we're providing opportunities for continuous learning and thought leadership. And I understand just how important it is to offer a valuable and industry relevant designation. Collaborating with my colleagues, industry professionals, and strategists, I've led various product improvement strategies for Eco Canada's EP designation, from strengthening our EP code of ethics and policies, adding elements of rigor and credibility to the EP designation, in addition to implementing new competencies and profiles into certification, such as the two impact assessment specializations we're here to talk about today. Joining me on the webinar today is Jenny Peters and George Hegman. Jenny, would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself to attendees?
Yes, thank you, Liz. My name is Jenny Peters. I'm the Director of Research at Eco Canada. It's my team that developed the competency profile for impact assessment management professionals, and I'm here today to discuss the ins and outs of that process and give you some insights into what's involved in the certification process as well.
Perfect, thank you, Jenny. Joining us as well is George Hegman, Vice President of Environmental Services with Stantec. George is joining us today because he was actually one of the contributors to building the competency profile for impact assessment management professionals and has a lot of experience in this area. George, could you take a moment to tell the attendees a little bit more about yourself and your experience?
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I'm a VP Environmental Services with Stantec in Calgary. As a 30-year environmental assessment practitioner, I have worked on major resource and infrastructure project EAs all across Canada, including energy, mining, and transportation. I have also, for government, industry, and universities, provided guidance and training on environmental assessments and maintained my outreach via various forums and publications towards advancing the practice of environmental assessment.
Great, thank you, George. So we'll get started with our program here today. Impact assessment, or IA, is a process that evaluates environmental, economic, and social conditions to predict the potential effects of a proposed development project. It can include information across a spectrum of areas. Impact assessment management professionals play an important role as awareness of human impact on the environment expands globally. Today, Jenny, George, and I will be speaking to you about the industry need and support for impact assessment, the competencies of impact assessment professionals developed by EcoCanada, as well as the certification options for impact assessment management professionals that are offered by EcoCanada. As Danielle mentioned, we'll provide some time at the end for questions, so please make note of those as we go in the question box. And with that, I would like to pass things off to George to talk about the importance of certification for impact assessment management professionals. Thank you, George.
I wish to begin by thanking EcoCanada for their continued support, development, and implementation of what has brought us here today in the announcement of the new environmental professional designation specializations of impact assessment practitioner and impact assessment reviewer. These will complement the growing portfolio of professional designations by EcoCanada and further advance Canada's professional environmental labour force capacity in meeting ever more challenging needs. The substance of my brief remarks are centered on answering one question: why such a designation? That is, why would this be needed? The origins of my comments come from the point of view of almost 30 years as a consultant practitioner, working on numerous major project environmental assessments across Canada. As such, while focused on the job of practitioner from my own experience, I will also make comments relevant to those for reviewers, for whom I have gained much familiarity. There is one fundamental and primary reason this designation is needed, is of value. Impact assessment, or as it is also commonly known, environmental impact assessment, represents a competency meritorious of finally being recognized for what it is: managing the assessment, preparation of information, filing to a regulatory authority, subsequent defense and expansion of that evidence to regulatory decision, and acting along the way as overall steward on behalf of proponent clients. But there is also a secondary reason. Through a formal recognized program of certification to ascribe an accreditation to what always has been a singularly established profession, but not widely recognized, if even accepted as such, accompanied by a stamp of approval of vetted skills, experience, and capabilities. Impact assessments, and certainly those for major projects, which garner, it seems, all the attention, deservedly or not, play a pivotal role in influencing their ultimate regulatory fate. Much is at stake. For the proponent, it's millions, if not billions of dollars of investment. For government, it's making the best decision in the public interest. For Canadians, it's the benefits and trust in balanced decision making. And for the natural environment, it's maintaining and improving ecological conditions. Preparing assessments involves teams of dozens or more generalists and specialists across a wide range of disciplines and services, and a broad knowledge, if not also more deeply as a subject matter expert. Assessments often take years to progress through preparation and its regulatory process, testing personal and professional skills. As always, when the stakes are high, expectations follow along multiple avenues, of which topmost is trust. That is, that the professional is trusted to enact quality traits that earn trust, due diligence of independence, and objectivity of thought and action. And so, now it finally comes to it. What, in my view, is the ultimate value of the Eco-Canada designation? It is to establish an independently verified confirmation that not only is one competent technically for the job, is equipped with the needed emotional intelligence and intellectual capacity, but through that is one who can be respected and trusted. All this while contractually acting as a consultant to a paying client on their projects, which to some observers garners the impressions of conflict of interest. The current reality is far from that impression, and the Eco-Canada designation shall assist to extinguish such views. The demands on one to achieve such ends are high, one acting as a consummate professional in its largest and most important sense, namely, as a master of their trade and servant to not only their client, but also, and for which I feel even more importantly, as the higher calling, servant to all Canadians, by which I wholly refer to the general public and Indigenous groups and the ecosphere we all inhabit and rely on for our lives. Impact assessment is a means for these professionals to meet that calling, one which our world needs now more than ever. I believe there will be great interest in aspiring Canadians to join that calling under the Eco-Canada designation to advance natural resource, infrastructure, energy, and other projects in a balanced and thoughtful way to help us all meet our common future. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I think it's very valuable for everyone to hear your perspective on the importance of certification for impact assessment. And we at Eco Canada certainly value yours and other insights and contributions that have helped us get to where we are today. Jenny, I'll now pass the presentation off to you to speak about the development of the impact assessment management professional competency profile.
Thank you, Liz. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about the background, the reason why we decided to go ahead and develop the competency profile or environmental standards, national occupational standards for impact assessment management professionals. As George mentioned, there is a gap in the marketplace wherein the individuals who are doing the most challenging work of overseeing and stewarding impact assessments and environmental assessments are not being recognized for all of the contributing efforts that they make to the success of major industrial projects. The development of the competency profile for impact assessment management professionals was a multi-year project at Eco Canada, where we had reached out to a wide variety of different practitioners and reviewers of competency of impact assessment management and impact assessment outputs to get their inputs to develop the national occupational standards. This document was developed and published in June of 2020, and it reflects the most up-to-date occupational standards for this particular group of professionals. We will be revising this on a regular basis, and our competency profile, as it evolves, will affect the certification process as well. Next slide, Liz. The competency profile is based on a number of different components. At the bottom, or the foundation of the competency profile, is the core knowledge requirements of an impact assessment management professional. Building on top of that, we have personal and professional competencies, which relate to the variety of different communication and teamwork and leadership skills needed for a competency professional. a competent professional. And then also we have the role-specific technical competencies, which are the competencies that we use to help assess the quality of the professional for the certification practice. Let's start by digging a little bit deeper into the core knowledge requirements for an impact assessment management professional. There are three main buckets of knowledge that we've identified that this profession requires. One is the knowledge of the impact assessment involved disciplines. These are a wide variety of disciplines, including scientific disciplines related to land and soil, air, water, plant and animal chemistry, engineering disciplines related to infrastructure, construction, environmental management, land use planning and built environment disciplines for urban and rural settings, public policy disciplines related to government policy, regulation, and legislation, legal disciplines, economic disciplines, social and cultural disciplines, indigenous relations and traditional knowledge, as well as health disciplines associated with understanding impacts on human health. The situation-specific knowledge of the IA regulatory application is another body of knowledge that we've identified. In particular, we're looking at the knowledge of specific subject matter related to the particular regulatory application being worked on. For example, pipelines, hydro dams, or roadways. Then the third bucket we've identified is knowledge of the IA methodology and practice. And in this case, we're looking at things like knowledge of measurement techniques, data analysis, the key steps in the process, project alternatives, and cumulative effects assessments. Building on the core knowledge, we have on one side of our development, the personal and professional competencies which are required. These personal and professional competencies, are also known as transferable competencies, are required for a wide variety of different occupations, but are of particular need for the impact assessment management professional. We've identified 10 various competencies in this space, including professional conduct and ethics, a very important component of developing the trust that George was speaking of just a moment ago. Continuous learning in order to keep up with the innovations in terms of technology and regulatory structures. Critical thinking skills, being able to assess risks and quality of the project outputs. Problem solving, analysis, decision making, digital skills, leadership, collaboration, and communication. We also have role-specific technical competencies, which we've identified in 8 broad buckets of categories. These categories reflect the most important elements of the work that's being done by the impact assessment management professional related to that impact assessment output. We've identified legal policy and regulatory competencies, competencies related to project planning, impact assessment execution and managing project risk, along with quality management, stakeholder relationship management, indigenous relations, and regulatory outreach. Now, these technical competencies are the criteria for assessing the impact assessment management professional's competence for the certification process. We have 2 impact assessment management professionals that we have identified in the certification. One is the practitioner and the other is the reviewer. Practitioners are responsible for ensuring that the impact assessment is comprehensive and defensible and satisfies both the proponent and regulatory authorities. Reviewers, on the other hand, ensure that all of the potential impacts are appropriately addressed and that the proposed mitigation measures are sufficient for that particular project. So let's dig a little deeper into these 8 classifications of competencies for the environmental impact assessment management professional. In the first bucket, we have the legal, policy, and regulatory competencies. We have 5 performance statements or competency statements within that bucket. 2 of those are relevant to reviewers. All 5 are relevant to practitioners. If we take a look more specifically, these competencies involve analyzing the relevant policies, legislation, and standards, ensuring compliance with applicable regulations, legislation, policy, and standards, participating in the development of internal policies and procedures, identifying risks, and providing expert advice to relevant stakeholders. The next classification is project planning competencies. In this case, all of the project planning competencies are relevant for a practitioner in this field, but are not considered to be relevant for a reviewer to be able to demonstrate competency. This reflects the fact that the practitioner is the one who's actually putting together the regulatory application or managing the oversight of that regulatory application. The types of competency statements that we have in this particular bucket include developing work, project plans, or project management plans, planning activities such as contracting and procurement, ensuring that the impact assessment scope, criteria, and conditions are adequately defined, coordinating resources and staffing the project appropriately, and also the ability to identify ways to design and execute the project so that it more closely aligns with the public good. The third broad category includes the impact assessment execution. And in this category, we've got one relevant competency statement for reviewers, which is manages the development of applications in accordance with regulations. The other 4, contributing to the development of terms and conditions for approvals, rigorously following a clear and defensible process, facilitating an iterative, transparent, team-based approach, and facilitating access to subject matter experts and information are relevant to the practitioner's work. Fourth bucket includes project risk management. In this case, both the practitioners and the reviewers have the responsibility for contributing to the development of the project's risk management strategy, ensuring effective execution of the risk management strategy, providing advice to the proponent regarding risk, and identifying direct and indirect consequences of environmental impacts. Likewise, the quality management competencies are also relevant for both practitioners and reviewers. And those include developing a quality management plan, sharing information in a continuous improvement feedback loop, implementing quality management processes, applying principles of quality assurance and scientific rigor to the application process, striving to produce outputs that pass scrutiny, and promoting the use of best available information and technologies. Our stakeholder relationship management is also the responsibility of practitioners, as it is with some of the competencies with regard to reviewers. In this case, all 6 competency statements are relevant to practitioners. The last 4 that we've got listed on the page here are relevant for reviewers. These competencies include ensuring the execution of a comprehensive stakeholder engagement plan, identifying criteria for evaluating proposals and land use plans in collaboration with relevant stakeholders, ensuring that information from technical specialists and relevant stakeholders is considered in the application, seeking to identify common ground among interested and affected parties, demonstrating understanding of stakeholder dynamics, and providing expert information in key meetings. The seventh category focuses particularly on Indigenous relations as a stakeholder group of high importance to the impact assessment process. In this case, all 5 competency statements are relevant to both practitioners and reviewers. And these include ensuring that the requirements for effective Indigenous consultation are incorporated in the application, demonstrating the ability to integrate traditional knowledge, belief systems, and Indigenous rights with Western scientific practices, demonstrating a commitment to open, honest, and ethical relationships with Indigenous people, demonstrating the ability to work respectfully, knowledgeably, and effectively with Indigenous people, and reaching outcomes that gain acceptance of all parties. To wrap up our technical competencies, we have the regulatory outreach competency bucket, which includes 2 competencies: facilitating engagement with regulatory bodies and interpreting proposed regulatory changes with respect to the impacts on current business practices and processes. In this case, the second competency is relevant for both practitioners and reviewers. These competency statements are the competencies that will be used for identifying the successful attainment of the regulatory competencies in order to be able to conduct the impact assessment and to be an impact assessment management professional certified by EcoCanada. I'll turn it back to Liz now for more information about the certification.
Great, thank you so much, Jenny. Now that Jenny has laid a really excellent foundation into the development and impact assessment competency profiles, I'd like to talk to you all about how this fits into the EP and EPT designations that are offered by EcoCanada. So to provide you all with a little bit of background, EcoCanada has been certifying environmental professionals since 2001, and we're always looking at ways to expand the certifications and ensure that they're relevant to the Canadian environmental sector and its practitioners. There are 2 tiers of certification that we offer. One is for employers and the other is for individuals. So we won't go into detail on the EP employer, which is the designation for organizations, but I thought it was important to mention that it is available. In terms of individual certification, these designations are based on education, training, career experience, and proficiency. So first we have the EPT, or Environmental Professional in Training. So this is our in-training designation for professionals, newcomers, or recent graduates with less than 5 years of environmental work experience. So our EPTs tend to be emerging professionals who will become that next generation of environmental leaders. They're looking for career guidance, and as members have access to both in-training framework and mentorship to help them develop the required skills to build their career. Next is the EP, or Environmental Professional. This designation is intended for the mid to senior level environmental professional with 5 or more years of environmental work experience. These individuals often cultivate thought leadership, they have influence, and provide future guidance in the sector. And then the final category of designations is EP Auditor. Environmental auditors assess the environmental operations and procedures for businesses, including government. They're responsible for making sure environmental standards are being met by the businesses and detecting existing compliance problems or environmental management system deficiencies. There are 2 options under EP Auditor. First is the EP EMSLA designation for environmental management system lead auditors, and the second is the EP CEA for compliance environmental auditors. Today, I'll be focusing on and giving more of a detailed breakdown of the EP and EPT, since we're here to talk about impact assessment specializations, which are available with the application of these 2 designations. So our EP certification program uses developed national occupational standards that Jenny spoke about as a product within certification. So EP applicants are able to select up to 5 areas of specialization that are listed on the bullet points of this slide. or if applying as an in-training and EPT, they can select up to 2 specializations. Applicants will undergo both a self-assessment and validation process to determine their competency level in their chosen areas of specialization. So there are 5 sectors that they're able to choose from, which are listed here in the Venn diagram and the boxes. The first is environmental protection. So work in this area really focuses on protecting the environment by lessening the disturbance in air, water, land, and ecosystems that we inhabit. This can mean working on projects that contribute to healthy living, stabilize the overall temperature of our atmosphere, and support biodiversity. The next is resource management. So individuals in this area work to find a way to conserve our natural resources, recognizing that they are valuable assets with the end goal of sustainable natural resource management. Next, environmental sustainability. So individuals in this area are dedicated to educating and shedding light on the best nature preservation techniques for future generations and shifting away from a culture of waste. These activities center on developing, disseminating, and applying knowledge in support of environmental protection and natural resource management. You'll notice as well on the Venn diagram that impact assessment is placed at the center of the Venn, as is environmental management. Environmental management represents core knowledge from environmental protection, resource management, and environmental sustainability. Environmental managers are experienced and have an understanding of each of the main sectors. They're all rounders who have a strong grasp on each of the main sectors. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the application process for EP. So this is a very short summary of the application process. All applicants for EP are required to have a diploma or degree, and as I mentioned earlier, a minimum of 5 years environmental work experience. There's also a $300 application and exam fee, after which they're able to proceed to registration, where they enter their resume information, training, education, and experience. All of this information is then internally reviewed, and the education and employment is confirmed by our internal review team. So if the applicant is found to be eligible, they meet the initial requirements, and they opt to specialize, they can move ahead to the self-assessment and peer validation process. If they're not specializing, they can immediately schedule and start preparing for their EP exam. On the previous slide, I mentioned that all applicants go through a self-assessment process. So I thought it would be a good idea to give you a sense of what that might actually look like. So Jenny talked about competency profiles. So every area of specialization is assigned that competency profile, that unique set of technical competencies. This is an example of an impact assessment practitioner self-assessment. So for each competency in that profile, the applicant has to select the level of experience, which varies from no experience all the way to lead experience. Excuse me. And they have to also indicate whether they have 1 or more years of experience in that competency within the last 5 years. Once they respond to the complete self-assessment, it's scored in our system to determine whether they've been successful in that area of specialization or not. So that rate of pass-fail is kept confidential, but applicants will always hear from our team within 3 business days. If they're not successful, the applicant can make a second attempt after feedback with our staff, or proceed in another specialization or without specialization. If the self-assessment is successful, they'll then move over to a peer validation phase, and this is where their experience is confirmed by a minimum of 3 professional references. These references can be current or previous coworkers, clients, etc. Really, essentially anyone that the applicant doesn't supervise and that they can confirm their experience. Achieving the appropriate validation of peers is a requirement to proceed with that specialization or specializations. All EPs, regardless of specializing or not, must successfully write the EP exam. All applicants are provided with a study guide as well as a practice exam to help them prepare. And then in terms of material, the exam itself is based on an EP body of knowledge. This body of knowledge consists of 4 categories. Section A is ethics, which covers the essentials of the EP code of ethics. Section B is the core enabling competencies, which describe those soft, or as Jenny refers to them, transferable skills that contribute to the successful work that practitioners do. Core knowledge areas, which outline the key areas of environmental knowledge that environmental professionals need to thrive. And lastly, specialized knowledge and technical competencies, which is really where that link to the National Occupational Standards come back in and those 16 areas of specialization that are available for certification. And when it comes to content of the exam itself, the exam only covers sections A, ethics, and section C, core knowledge areas. Our EP exam is divided into two parts, ethics and core knowledge. Ethics will account for 25% of the exam grade, where the applicant is asked questions based on that relevant section within the EP body of knowledge. The ethics section describes each of the tenets of the EP Code of Ethics listed on this slide in great detail and in an effort to provide the EP with clear direction on how ethics should be used in their work. The second section, as I mentioned, is based on core knowledge areas. So while it's not necessarily, these 6 areas are not an inclusive list of all the knowledge that an EP has to have, when they're working in the environment, these are the 6 areas that came out as most highly rated in focus groups and validation when we created the EP body of knowledge. These were the ones that the feedback was that they should be aware of the most. So these are the ones that we chose in order to narrow down the exam a little bit. All right, this is a visual representation of the EPT application process. So it is less in terms of steps and time commitment than the EP, and there's a few key differences I'll just note instead of going over everything. EPTs do not have to have any environmental work experience. I already talked about that a few slides back. So this designation is ideal for anyone with less than 5 years of work experience. EPTs still require a diploma or degree, and there's a mandatory self-assessment for EPTs. They have to select 1 or 2 areas of specialization, but the peer validation portion that the EPs go through, at this point within the EPT application, it's more of a reference check, and it's conducted on an audit basis only. The reason for this is because those with less than 5 years of experience are still building up their areas of expertise, still getting some experience under their belt, and the self-assessment at this stage is more about documenting any experience they may have acquired to date. And the biggest difference, I think, is that there's no exam for our EPT applicants. Once all the application requirements have been met, applications are ratified by the Canadian Environmental Certification and Approvals Board. The role of our approvals board is to oversee and ensure the impartiality of the administration and approvals of any and all designations that are developed by EcoCanada. The approvals board meets the second Tuesday of each month, meaning that we are adding new members on a monthly basis. Once an EP or EPT becomes certified, they're expected to uphold the EP Code of Ethics. This ensures the professional accountability. EPs are bound by a distinctive ethical code regarding relationships with the environment, the public, clients, employees, and colleagues. EPs have to work hard to gain and retain the trust of the public, industry, government officials, and other stakeholders. This is achieved through collaboration, critical thinking, project management, and continuous learning. It's also important that an EP render services based on advanced knowledge, skill, and judgment, which encourages trust and rapport between an EP and the public. Members are also expected to submit annual professional development activities and a renewal payment on an annual basis. In terms of what happens next, applying online is easy. You can go to our website at eco.ca, and from the EP certification heading, click on the option for the EP designation or EPT designation, depending on what your level of experience is. So it's not, I had a short video here. Let me see if I can get it to play. Okay, there we go. So you'll select either EP or EPT designation, and then you'll scroll down to the pay your application fee button. So just three easy steps there. And we'll also be sharing a number of resources with you today as a handout to this webinar and via email as well. I think the applicant guide in particular is, that's the document that will take you through the process step by step. And it also contains contact information. So if you need additional support, you can reach out to our team for that assistance. Okay, I think we can now move on to take questions from our attendees today, if we've received any. And I'd ask Jenny and George perhaps to turn their cameras back on, if you can. Danielle, did we receive any questions from our attendees?
We absolutely did receive some questions for our attendees, and thank you so much for that informative session on this very important specialization. It sounds like there's some real relevance and some opportunity there for our attendees. So the first question that we have is from David, and David is asking, who is independently verifying this? Who is it independently verified by?
Is that in reference to, do you know, the development of the competency profile, or?
I can ask David on a separate chat, and then we'll go on from this one. Jeff is asking a question. What about the policy and legislation specialization? He has that as well. So does that qualify?
In terms of, if he's referring to being an EP or an EPT and having the policy and legislation specialization already, that's fantastic. Any existing member, EP or EPT, is available to add specializations to their profile. So it's a very easy step. If he wants to reach out to me or ep@eco.ca, I could take him through those steps in adding an area of specialization.
Absolutely, and we'll have all of your contact at the end here. And I just
Mhm.
wanted to point out that that handout is at the top. If you just look at the top of your screen, you'll see a little button there that says materials. And if you go into that, the impact assessment handout is right in there for anyone to use. This next question is from Steph, and Steph is asking, is the intention of the EIA designation only for large EIAs? The scope sounds like it would exclude people working on smaller EIAs.
Jenny, do you have any feedback on that question, just based on the competencies developed?
That's a very good question, Steph. We have assessed the impact assessment management professional competencies based on the expectation that an individual can do at a large scale process or a large scale industrial project. Where an individual is not experienced in all of those, that is not necessarily a requirement. You don't have to be able to demonstrate perfect knowledge or mastery of all of the competencies in order to receive the impact assessment management professional certification. So we have integrated that understanding that some of the practitioners that are operating today may not have all of those competencies or may not have mastered all of those competencies as part of the work that they do.
If I may add to that, the question involves a common matter, and amongst those of us involved in this practice, the difference between big and small environmental assessments, it would be my view that certainly the fundamental matter is preparing any regulatory application that reflects environmental assessment information needs to a regulatory authority, which can range from a stream crossing, a typical so-called smaller one, to a large industrial facility. And that fundamentally the skill sets and needs are, notwithstanding the nature of the project, quite similar in terms of the needs for the practitioner and the reviewer.
Wonderful. I do have a follow-up from Jeff asking about the policy and legislation. He says in the Venn diagram, policy and legislation, it wasn't listed as a specialization, and he's wondering if it's been discontinued.
No, definitely not. Let's go back here. Could have been an accidental omission on my part. Oh, right here under sustainability,
Wonderful.
the fourth bullet there. So yes, it's still active. We haven't eliminated any of the areas of specialization. They're all continuing to be offered. We've just added these two new ones here under impact assessment.
Okay, fantastic. We have some questions from our biologists. What's the difference between getting an EP designation or an RP bio from the provincial accreditation organization? What is the advantage of getting an EP accreditation over an RP bio, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one that we certainly get a lot. As it stands right now, obtaining your EP designation, getting certified with Eco Canada is on a voluntary basis. That being said, it is in the long-term goals to have the ability for regulatory recognition of EP. That's something that we're always trying to pursue different opportunities across Canada. Actually, we are hoping to submit an application to the Office of the Superintendent of Professional Governance in BC this fall to have EPs recognized in the province. So we're working on that application actively now, which would be great. For now, what I can say is that we are certainly big fans of this idea of a discipline plus concept. Certainly becoming an RP bio, a PN, PEG, um, those are all great designations and a good demonstration of, in general, the area of work that you're in, the education path you took at the post-secondary level. I think, one of the advantages with EP as a complement to that is that it will really make it stand out of your specific environmental competencies, right? Certainly as well, if you're in, one or more areas of specialization, it can really drill down that very specific expertise that you have as well. So I would say that is a large benefit for certification and why, I don't necessarily think that it needs to be one or the other. I think that EP is a great complement to those designations.
Wonderful. Here's another question. Do you need to work in the environmental sector in order to move from EPT to EP? Claudia is saying she currently doesn't work in the sector, but she's hoping to get into it.
Great question. You do. So in order to be an EP, you need 5 years of environmental work experience. So there's if you're an EPT first, that's great. I would say that gets your foot in the door, that gets you familiar with the certification. It can connect you to mentorship and other benefits within the certification community. But you would need at least 5 years of experience in order to obtain your EP. Now, there's no expiry on that EPT designation. If it takes you longer than 5 years, 6 years, 7 years to get that actual 5 years of work experience, that's okay. You could maintain your EPT as long as you need to, and then you would be able to initiate an upgrade application as an EPT to obtain your
Okay. What is considered an environmental related experience? What kind of jobs? What kind of companies? Just kind of a more general, broad question.
EP. Yeah, it is broad, and I think
It
that
is very
the
broad. Sorry, my apologies. That's from Albus
no, but
here.
no, it's good. I think it's good to be able to highlight that we don't say you must work in this area of the environment to obtain your EP or EPT designation with Eco Canada. The sector itself is very broad, right? You could be working in government, difference between public, private sector, consulting. You could work in a lab. There's so many different careers within the environmental sector. And actually, on our Eco Canada website, there's some great tools, career profiles. We have a specialization guide actually that we'll be sending out after this webinar. And that's going to provide, a further breakdown of all the specializations that we offer for certification. It's going to also identify potential careers related to those areas of specialization as well. So um, again, there's no requirement to be in a specific area of the environment to apply for your EP or EPT, and that's certainly intentional.
Some international questions. For international candidates, do we need experience from Canada or can the experience come from outside of Canada? Also, how
Yeah,
can international people be verified and what is the process?
sure. great question. So I'll address that first part. Um, so in order to become an EPT, you don't need environmental work experience. So if you are currently living outside of Canada or you are in Canada and have international experience, then the EPT is an option for you. If you do not have 5 years of Canadian environmental work experience, the EPT is the option for you. If you have a combination of Canadian and environmental work experience, you would need a minimum of 6 years of environmental work experience with at least 1 year in Canada to be eligible to apply as an EP. So we can accept different combinations there, but you would need to be working in Canada for at least a year and have a cumulative 6 years of environmental work experience. And then with regards to, how international applicants can be validated, um, I'm assuming that's an education related question, and that's the question around validation. So
Mhm.
all applicants for certification for EP and EPT are required to have a diploma or a degree. So these education pathways do not have to also be from an environmental background. It can be really, really from anything as long as you have a minimum diploma or degree. If your education was outside of Canada, you can get an academic assessment done. It's not a course by course, very costly assessment either. You would just need to have somebody like IQAS or WES, which is World Education Services. I would say they're probably one of the most popular. What they can do is review your international credentials and determine a Canadian equivalent. So it may say that, your master's degree is equivalent to a Canadian master's degree, and that would be all that we need. It's just that confirmation.
Okay, wonderful. I've also actually noticed a lot of questions that are coming in with some very specific experience questions. I just wanted to let everyone know that I'll be forwarding these questions on to the panelists after this session, as we won't have time to answer each of those very specific questions. Here's another question, though, from a newcomer. If someone is starting as a newcomer or as an immigrant, do they go for the EPT? Is that how they begin the process?
Yes, yeah, particularly if they don't have any, that minimum of 6 years or and with at least one of those years in Canada. If they've just arrived in Canada, then EBT is the perfect place to start.
Wonderful. And Jeff has a question here that I think everyone wants to know. And he's asking, if I want to add the impact assessment specialization, do I go to the portal and pay the $100 fee to EP add change specialization fee? Then I'll get an email for the new specialization competency test?
Yeah, that's exactly what will happen. So through his online portal, there is that option to add change specialization. He selects that, pays that fee, and what will happen is he'll then be prompted to select the area or areas of specialization he'd like to add, and he'll go through the self-assessment and the peer validation. There's no exam or additional requirements when adding a specialization. It's just the fee, which is $100 for EP, $50 for EPT, and you will undergo a self-assessment and a peer validation.
Great. And Leah has a question. Can we get the impact assessment specialization as an EPT?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, I think that that's it for all of our questions today. Like I said, I'll be handing over these kind of more specific questions about masters and things like that over to the panel, and they can reach out to you and follow up. Once again, that handout is up on the top with a little clipboard there that says materials underneath it, and you can download that. And here are their contact: gpeters@eco.ca, egetty@eco.ca, and george.hegman@stantec.com. If you have any further questions or would like a follow-up, you can certainly reach out to me at dfisher@eco.ca, and I can send those questions on to our panelists. Thank you so much, everyone, for such a fantastic session. If you have any further comments or anything at the end that you would like to say, please say them now, and we'll end this broadcast shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.